everybody. This is the Hillbilly John Show. I'm Larry Yost, your host today. Today we got Chris Rollo with us, and Hillbilly John would like to thank our sponsors. It's brought to you by Ultimate Structures, World Importing, Gary's Auto Sales, and Sailors on the Mon. Hey, today we are talking about Memorial Day. This is our Memorial Day special, and we're going to have several guests on. Chris, are you with us?
Yeah, I'm here.
Great. So, Chris, being Memorial Day and talking a little bit about what's the meaning of Memorial Day and the importance of it, could you give us our listeners a lot better idea? Because I know a lot of people don't always use the holiday in the way that they should. They don't really celebrate it in the way, because it's not really a celebration. It's Memorial. So could you tell us a little bit more about why Memorial Day is so important to us?
Yeah, sure. Well, because so many lives, thousands of lives, hundreds of thousands of lives of people have spilled their blood in memory, of our nation, in defense of our nation. And so we honor them. We stand in memory to honor them for what they've done. So hence the name Memorial Day. We remember what they've done, fighting in wars and serving, and again, some have given the ultimate sacrifice in dying for our country.
Absolutely. And that's it's more than just, we were talking earlier, it's more than hot dogs and sparklers and things like that. A lot of people kind of switched it over to the beginning of summer, and they really kind of glaze over what the real meaning is. And we're talking about every soldier that has spilled blood or that's lost their lives in battle for our great country, and paying the ultimate sacrifice. And that's what we want more people to understand during Memorial Day, to take a few minutes and go out to your cemeteries and really give back to the people who've given you everything that you have today. And that's I hate to say that it's been lost on people, but our younger generations we need to pass this down on to the younger generations so they can continue the tradition of memorializing the people that have given the ultimate sacrifice. So I know that you were a military guy. What branch were you in, Chris?
I served in the U.S. Army because the U.S. Army was the organization that saved my parents' lives during World War II. My parents grew up in Italy during World War II, and the Nazis actually took over my parents' town in southern Italy. And so these people who were farmers, simple working-class people, my mother and father's family, they had to actually live in caves in the mountains for a month, and they ran out of food after about 3 weeks. And so they got by on cow's milk and goat's milk, because they had some cows and goats on the farm that they took with them in these caves in the mountains. But they were praying for a miracle, right, and for God to deliver them from this horrible situation. And their prayers were answered when the U.S. Army's 3rd Infantry Division came into town. This would have been early November of 43. They drove the Nazis out of the town. The U.S. Army gathered up their rations and fed the town and saved my parents' lives. So when I graduated high school, I knew the only branch that I wanted to serve in was the Army, because they saved my parents' lives.
Right. That's great. That's a great reason to be part of that. My dad was also in the Army during Vietnam, and I'm still very proud of that man. And he is, still a farmer today, and just very proud of the service that he gave. But is there something in? That's a great memory too. Thank you for bringing that to our attention. I liked hearing that story. Is there anything that you can think of anybody that you would want to memorialize in their story?
Oh, yeah. I think our founding fathers were unbelievably incredible men of courage that never really get the praise that they deserve, at least not today. There was a time, a generation or so ago, when people did. I think we've lost sight of our founding fathers, what they've sacrificed. For instance, if you listen to some people today in our culture, they'll tell you that our founding fathers were racist, slave owners, bigots.
We're hearing a lot of that today. You're right.
Yeah, right. But unfortunately, that's not entirely true. Do you know that 75% of the founding fathers never owned slaves?
Right.
The majority of these people gave up their own money, their own land, and some of them were killed and shot by the British for signing the Declaration of Independence. Some of them had their land confiscated and taken. It's not always as cut and dry as we make it seem. There are always a few bad apples in every group. We know that. But when 75% of our founding fathers did not even own slaves, it speaks volumes of the fact that, wait a minute, these guys weren't racist, they weren't horrible. They sacrificed their entire life savings. Some of them lost their land, again, were shot and killed, or even thrown in prison by the British for having the guts to take on the world's greatest navy and world's greatest army with, I mean, think about it, the odds against them were pretty severe, and yet they did it anyway.
I know. And that's something that it seems as if history has to jump through hoops to ignore all that. And once again, it's a perfect opportunity to celebrate these people and what they were able to give. Like you said, they were shot and killed, standing up against the world's greatest army or the world's greatest navy at the time. And we were doing things that the rest of that England was not happy about, to the point to where they were aggressive enough to come in and try to take what was not theirs. And we were able to stand up to it, and that's what affords us the same freedoms that we have to this day. And once again, to every soldier that has fallen, we owe that debt of gratitude.
Absolutely, and I think of every generation who served in our military. First of all, Memorial Day was it was actually called Decoration Day.
Yep.
And it was only celebrated for the Civil War.
Right.
Hundreds of thousands of people died in the Civil War. But then as World War I and World War II and Korea and Vietnam and others came along, then they just changed it to Memorial Day to remember, to give a memory of the people who served. When I think of our founding fathers and what they sacrificed, the man who stands head and shoulders above everybody is George Washington.
Yes, absolutely. Glad that you. Yeah. Okay. Go ahead.
Yeah. Even on the History Channel, they'll say that George Washington was the greatest founding father of all. In fact, I watched a documentary about George Washington last summer on the History Channel, and they called George Washington the foundingest father of them all. What George Washington did was nothing short of amazing. First of all, George Washington was the wealthiest man in all of Virginia. He owned millions of dollars, which by today's standard would be over $1 billion.
Wow.
And he took, think about that. So he was, by today's standard, he would have been a billionaire, and he gave every single dime of that money to the cause of the Revolution.
Wow.
That's incredible.
That's how much he believed in our country.
Yeah. He wanted to get the oppression of a controlling big government, centralized government off the backs of the people so that they could pursue their own life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness without the external control of a king or whatever. So the cool thing was, not only did he give all that money away for the cause of the Revolution, where the British officers were known for going into the bars and the brothels and picking up prostitutes and so on, George Washington would sleep in the field with his soldiers.
Right.
And so, I mean, in the cold, right, in the tents. And so his focus was, I'm here. I'm not going to leave and go get drunk and party. I'm going to stay here with you guys. And to make matters even more amazing, instead of commanding the battles from 50 to 100 yards away, George Washington often would run right into the battle with his troops and fight the battle with them.
That is a show of genuine courage. That is, yeah, somebody that we, like you said, generations lose sight of what this man was responsible for, and to hear stories like that, it's phenomenal. Yeah.
Yeah, George Washington, I think it's safe to say, was the linchpin that held the whole revolution together. And then he was the linchpin that held together and built the country, because when the war ended, the Congress was penniless. They were in debt. They owed the soldiers a bunch of money, and they couldn't pay the soldiers. The soldiers were angry. The soldiers who just fought this revolution were going to actually have a coup and take over the new government and have a military coup. And George Washington stopped that. Then he became the first president. He only served 2 terms. I mean, all of these, there's a series of things that George Washington did that were just stellar and amazing, that when we call him the father of the country, it's for good reason. So there's a lot of people that have come into our country, served in our military, and passed away, that we could give honor to and give memory to on Memorial Day. But in my mind, it first starts with George Washington.
Right. Yeah, that's a perfect beginning. Hey, Chris, we're going to take a minute for a break, and then what we're going to do is come right back in and talk to another guest, if that's all right. You going to be with us on the other side?
Yes.
All right, great. Okay, and we're back. It's a Hillbilly John Memorial Day special. Today we've got Chris with us, and Chris is just talking a little bit more about our founding fathers being some of the originators of why we need to look back on our history and remember the people who gave this ultimate sacrifice, because that is what Memorial Day is about. Chris, so what else you got? It's just it's amazing to hear you.
Well, I appreciate you saying that. I just love America, and I love our founding. And George Washington was just an amazing man, as we mentioned, giving all that money away. I mean, over $1 billion by today's standards, it was what he was worth, and he gave every dime of it to the cause of the revolution. What an amazing man. Another thing that I think was so incredible about Washington is his just commitment to people. He had kind of a fatherly or even grandfatherly figure identity among the people or the soldiers who served with him. They loved this man because he was so committed to them and so committed to doing what was right by them. I mean, this is a man who, think about this, at Valley Forge, Pennsylvania, which is, I guess, just east of Harrisburg, they were stuck there the whole winter. And for whatever reason, the bureaucrats in Washington did not give them the food they needed to survive. They lost 3,000 of their best soldiers because they starved to death. Starved to death. And Washington was so angry that Congress dragged their feet getting him the money. And I understand they were struggling financially, but they finally did send food, but it was too late. 3,000 of their best soldiers died from starvation. And when the food arrived, it was spoiled. It was just such a mess. And this man, Washington, he was in the snow on his knees praying, crying out to God. It's just amazing, the passion, the intensity of this guy. And, I mean, this is a man who single-handedly put the military together, found a way to win. Did you know that George Washington lost over 90% of his battles?
No, I did not know that.
But he hated it because this guy wanted to win. So they lost over 90% of their battles, but they won the war. After the Revolutionary War ended, Washington wrote something about God's hand. Back then, they usually would refer to God as the hand of providence, the hand that provides. God provides, right?
Right.
And the Jewish or Hebrew word is Jehovah Jireh, the God who provides. So rather than use the Jewish pronunciation Jehovah Jireh, the God who provides, Washington and people during that time would just say the hand of providence, God's hand of providence. So he wrote and I quote, the hand of providence, means God's hand that provides, has been so conspicuous, so obvious in all this. He said that he must be worse than an infidel that lacks faith, and more than wicked that is not gratitude enough to acknowledge his obligations. So translation, God's providence was so obvious during the revolution, you have to either be a wicked fool to not acknowledge that he did all this.
Yeah.
So I mean, that's the kind of faith that these men had, the guts, the nerves of steel. So when I think of a Memorial Day, I think of every soldier, sailor, Marine, and airman that gave their life. But for me, personally, I go back to the Founding Fathers because of, first of all, they were the first people to sacrifice their lives and their honor. But just what they did was just amazing to go up against the world's greatest Navy and Army.
Right. Yeah. And like you said, lead to every other great branch of the military and the United States military, the Marines, the Air Force, the Army, and the Navy. Everybody there. Now we have, of course, the Space Force that President Trump had put into place before he left. It's hard to say, what that branch will be doing, but it seems as if we are fighting war on a different level today. We have cyber war and obviously a space race again here on the planet Earth. So necessary to extend our military out a little bit, it seems. Yeah,
and it's a different time, different generation. I mean, it's different since I served in the Army. Things have completely changed since I've served, and I've been out of the military a few decades, and already, I mean, you can see the change. The technology is changing, the type of battle is changing, but what doesn't change is it requires character, it requires tenacity, courage to say, I'm going to stand up and defend, the cause of freedom and liberty. This upcoming September will be 234 years since the Founding Fathers signed the Constitution.
Right.
234 years since the Constitution, and of course, on the 4th of July, we'll celebrate the Declaration of Independence.
Yep.
So let me see, 2021 minus 1776. I'm going to get that 2021. I got a calculator here so I can add it up correctly. It's let me see, 2021 minus 1776 equals 245 years this 4th of July since the Declaration of Independence.
Wow. Yeah. It's stood the test of time, and we owe that to our Founding Fathers. Absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely. And then as you move through history, you see the Civil War, you see other wars. But here's what's interesting. Did you know that what brought about the American Revolution was something that happened before the Revolution called the Great Awakening? It was a spiritual revival in America that launched basically the belief that God was involved in the creation of this country. So without the spiritual awakening before the Revolution, without the Second Great Awakening, this spiritual revival that led to the Civil War and the end of slavery and the beginning of civil rights, you have to start wondering, you take the God factor out, maybe there's no American Revolution, maybe there's no end of slavery, maybe there's no creation of civil rights.
Right. Exactly. Well, that's a perfect example. You don't think about it in that line, but that is an absolutely perfect description of what happened at the time and the events. Yeah, that occurred in our history. Absolutely.
Yeah. So it really makes you think. And another thing here's something that's pretty interesting concerning the American Revolution. Have you ever heard of a guy named Sir Henry Clinton?
No, I can't say that I have.
Sir Henry Clinton's father was the governor of New York, and he was an officer in the British military. And, Cornwallis surrendered down there in the Virginia Beach area, and that ended up leading to the end of the war. Cornwallis originally was not going to surrender. What happened was Sir Henry Clinton was supposed to show up with thousands of troops to reinforce Cornwallis, and if he had done that, he would never have surrendered to Washington. But Sir Henry Clinton never showed up with the reinforcements in time, and so Cornwallis surrendered to Washington in the Chesapeake area there so that he would save the lives of his troops, and that ended up leading to the end of the war. Do you know why Henry Clinton, this British officer, never showed up on time with his reinforcements to give to Cornwallis?
Why is that?
Henry Clinton was having an affair with one of his officers' wives.
Oh, my.
So if he hadn't been doing that, he would have showed up on time with reinforcements. Cornwallis doesn't surrender. The war drags on. Who knows? Maybe we don't win. But this one man, because of his moral failure,
Right, yeah.
did not show up on time. Didn't give the British the troops. Cornwallis surrendered, and that ends up leading to the end of the war.
Oh, my. Oh, Chris, that's a phenomenal story. We have a caller on the line, so we're going to take that. I think we have a caller on the line.